You're listening to the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.
We should probably just check back and revise what we already know about Ketubot. And the best place to do that is the Mishneh Torah. And the Maimonides says that before entering into a chuppah, a man actually has to write a marriage contract for his wife. He has to pay the price of the scribe for writing the contract. And if she's a virgin, the price is not less than 200 dinarim. If she's not a virgin, it's no less than 100. And the sages, this is the money that she will receive if he dies or if she's divorced. In other words, this is her financial security in the event that he's no longer around. It's not the price of the bride, it's the amount of money he puts down to assure her financial security. And the Rambam says, Maimonides says, the sages ordained the requirement of a ketubah for a wife, so that it wouldn't be because it wouldn't be a casual thing for people to carry out divorce. Divorce is a serious thing and it's got financial consequences. And, this is a lot of money, whether it's 100 or 200 dinarim, it's a lot of, it's a lot of money. People don't divorce casually. And the Rambam goes on to say, it's forbidden for a man to stay with his wife even a single hour without a ketubah. So this is really a big deal. And there's a differential amount for widows and for virgins. And we speculated that there might be good economic reasons there, that possibly a widow has already received the ketubah from her first husband, and possibly the rabbis want to make, if you like, an economic incentive to marry widows. So they set, if you like, the level of the ketubah lower than it might otherwise. They set the level of the ketubah lower. And we learned that we closed actually on the fourth Mishnah of the chapter that Betula almana grusha v'chalutza min hanisuin, a virgin, someone who is physically a virgin, but she's already married. So maybe the marriage hasn't been consummated. She has been married, but the marriage is not consummated. Betula, and she's an almana, she's a widow, or grusha, maybe she's divorced, or chalutza min hanisuin, maybe she's a chalutza. So her husband died childless, and she gave chalitza to her brother-in-law. Ketubatan money, their ketubah is a money. In other words, 100 dinarim. Ve'ein lahen tanat betulim. There's no claim of non-virginity upon her. We close on this Mishnah. So the Mishnah seems to assume that the Mishnah doesn't investigate physical virginity. It assumes that someone who's already been married is not a virgin, or at least for the purpose of the ketubah, someone who's already been married receives a lower sum of money in her ketubah. And similarly, if there's a presumption that she may have been raped or abused, so hagioret v'hashvuya v'hashifcha, a convert or a captive or a slave, sheniftu or shenit gairu or shenishtachachu yeterot al banot shalosh shanim v'yom echad, if they've been redeemed or converted or free when they're more than 3 years old, then ketubatan maneh, their ketubah is a maneh, in other words, 100 zuz. Ve'ein lahen tanat betulim, you can't make a claim of non-virginity. And we covered this essentially before the break. So the Mishnah then goes on to another kind of claim of non-virginity, which gives us a really interesting insight actually into real practical marriage customs in the time of the Mishnah. Someone who eats with his father-in-law in Judah, in Yehuda, in the province of Judah, shelo of Edim, without witnesses. So he's staying with his father-in-law, obviously in his bride's house. His bride's obviously there. He can't raise a claim of non-virginity against his wife because he's been alone with her. Now, what is going on here? And the Bartanura is actually going to explain. And the Bartanura gives us a fantastic explanation. He eats with his father-in-law in Judah. What are we talking about here? So the Bartanura says, when they were making the betrothal celebration in the house of the bride's father in Judea. Now, remember, in those days, the betrothal and the marriage might be, as much as a year apart. Because after the betrothal, the husband would have to basically work or transact or arrange to get a hold of the money necessary to perform the marriage. So today we do kiddushin and erusin, we kiddushin and nisuin on the same day, at the same instant. We do it all under the chuppah. But in those days, the kiddushin was a long, long time before. So the Bartanura is talking about the betrothal feast when the couple are not yet married. Now, when they're not yet married, according to the plain halacha, they should not yet be living together or be intimate together. But it seems to be different in Yehuda. So let's carry on reading the Bartanura. So they're making the betrothal celebration in the house of the bride's father in Judea. It was a practice that the fiancé would be alone with his fiancée, that in order that his heart, libor gas means his heart should grow, but it's got a slight, I've translated this literally, but it's a expression that has it's a rude tone. It's a rude expression. It's not a pleasant expression, actually, but there's clear sexual implication. There's a clear sexual implication here. And so this would happen essentially when he was in his father-in-law's house right after the betrothal. When she gets married after that, so a few months after that, they'll have the nisuin. Ein lo tanat p'tulim. He can't make a claim of non-virginity because the assumption is that they've had a sexual relationship before, but after betrothal, but before marriage. And that's essentially what the Mishnah summarizes it, if you like, very compactly. Someone who eats with his father-in-law in Judah without witnesses, he can't raise a claim of non-virginity. And then the Mishnah is now going to segue to the question of, we've talked about virgins and widows. What about someone from a priestly family? And there is clearly going to be and we've seen before, there's this tension in the Mishnah between, do the priests have extra rights or not? And sometimes there's stress, if you like, in those, there's stress along those lines. And of course, the Mishnah is codified probably 130 years after the temple's no longer going. But some of the voices in the Mishnah are older, and of course that tension is still there. Now, and we're going to rule both for and against the priests now. So we'll see that tension play out in both directions. Echad almonot Yisrael, echad almonot Kohanim. Ketubatan moneh. Both Israelite and priestly widows have a ketubah that is a moneh. In other words, 100 zuz. So they have the same level of ketubah. But Beit Din shel HaKohanim hayu govin li v'tzula 400 zuz. But the court of the priests used to collect for a virgin 400 zuz. That's 400 dinars. Velo meichu biyadam chachamim. And the sages did not protest. Now, remember, the ordinary ketubah for a virgin is 200. So the court of the Kohanim seems to be collecting 400 for a virgin who comes from a priestly family. And the sages seem to be going along with it. Lo meichu biyadam chachamim.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.